Hi, this is Dr. John Sterling. In this short video presentation, I'd like to challenge you with some assumptions that terrorism has with regard to our criminal justice system. Using traditional criminal justice tools to fight terrorism is a lot like swatting a fly with a hammer. There's nothing wrong with a hammer, it's just the wrong tool for the job. Before we can have any kind of discussion about homeland security, we need to have some baseline understandings of what's at stake. The challenge is not just providing security for the people, but it's also to preserve the fundamental principles that define us as a federal, constitutional, democratic republic. We may win the war on terror, but can we do so without losing our national identity? Our fight is against terrorism, but in an even broader sense, it's against all enemies, foreign and domestic, whose ambition it is to destroy America by ignoring or abandoning or directly confronting the basic principles. We're in a struggle for the soul of America. Terrorism is just one of our adversaries. But what we must preserve is the integrity of who we are, the identity of America. The American criminal justice system is designed with certain fundamental assumptions. A man is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and that proof must be ascertained beyond reasonable doubt. The system is designed to afford many specific procedural safeguards, what we call due process, or a procedure that is owed, a procedure that is due. The criminally accused is guaranteed a fair trial with attorney representation, a jury, rules of evidence, and other procedures. This system contemplates that the average man will have protection against an overzealous government. It levels the playing field, if you will. That's an expression of the principle of balance of power between the people and the government. So the justice system is also designed to be reactive. That is, it reacts when a crime has been committed, a criminal has been identified, an accusation has been made. And so the system identifies the perpetrator, investigates the facts, determines the guilt, and ascertains the appropriate punishment. One of the fundamental assumptions to the system, for the system to work, is that society is comprised of people who, by and large, want to live in harmonious relationship one with another. The criminal, however, at the risk of being overly simplistic here, the criminal is one who doesn't want to play by the rules. Criminal behavior is behavior that is rebellious against the order of society. Now, most of the people who rebel against the order of society do so for personal gain, usually at the expense of somebody else's labor. So crime of that nature is based primarily upon greed or the acquisition of personal power. And its implications and ramifications are pretty well understood. Terrorism, however, is a completely different construct. Like common criminals, terrorists do not desire a civil, harmonious relationship, but more, terrorism seeks to dominate, seeks to subjugate. It seeks to destroy all opposition. That's a completely different animal. So terrorism utterly destroys any semblance of power, and it looks only to what kind of social order is in the context or as defined by the terrorist. So what sense does it make to grant government protection to a person whose intent is to destroy the government? That doesn't even make sound logical sense. That's D-U-M, dumb. Terrorism is usually rooted in some ideology of absolute control. And with the advent of weapons of mass destruction and other technological advancements, this creates a category of conduct that is far more sinister than mere crime or merely criminal. Terrorism, regardless of its particular ideology, is an enterprise that's far too dangerous to be allowed to linger in the background, to erupt whenever and however the terrorist chooses. So to ferret out and decisively deal with terrorism, governments have to be more proactive. That's different than the reactive nature that is inherent in the design of our own system of criminal justice. If we are going to try to use a criminal justice system to deal with terrorists, then we're going to have to identify terrorism as a unique category of offense and terrorists as a unique category of offender. This is going to require different rules of evidence, different applications of due process if we're going to try to use the criminal justice system. Usually in our discussions, students bring up about the Fourth Amendment and potential violations via the USA Patriot Act. The Fourth Amendment is a guarantee against unreasonable searches and seizures. Do you think that what is unreasonable, what investigative techniques would be unreasonable in the investigation of a robbery, for example, might be completely reasonable in the investigation of a terrorist armed with some, biological weapon or, some weapon of mass destruction? The potential is completely different. When the perpetrator is planning to blow up a school or release a chemical substance that will kill hundreds or even thousands of people, that's not an act that's descriptive of criminal conduct. That, my friends, is an act of war. Now, historically, the U.S. has treated terrorism that's committed by persons that are not aligned with a nation state, in other words, non-state actors. We have treated those as the domain of domestic law enforcement, and that's no longer tenable, if it ever was tenable to begin with. In accordance with international law, most countries think that anticipatory self-defense is a component part of self-defense, the basic right of self-defense. But if and to the extent that we do become more proactive in the fight of terrorism, we also could seriously jeopardize the rights of U.S. citizens. We could enlarge the scope and the power of government, and we could absolutely destroy whatever balance of power we might have left if it's not already totally destroyed. But on the other hand, if government proves to be ineffective at protecting against terrorism, and if the criminal justice system attempts to treat terrorists in the same way as we treat garden variety or common criminals, then those very same safeguards that are intended to protect the rights of the citizens not only are ineffective, but they are in fact a hindrance to the prevention of potentially catastrophic outcomes caused by terrorist acts. So many of the elements of our criminal due process are at cross purposes with effective anti or counterterrorism operations. So it may be time to look at a policy change, perhaps some legislative changes. But this whole tension, this whole dynamic invites a discussion about entrapment, surveillance, detention, torture, rendition, and a whole host of other topics. So tools that may be effective or even necessary for the preservation of the American system may cause such a radical change in the system that it renders it unrecognizable from its original design. Empowering government to deal proactively with a very real terror threat will also create a significant imbalance of power between the government and the people. Given the secretive nature of counterterrorism operations, the more we actively and decisively engage in the terror threat, the greater will be the power wielded by some segments of government. It threatens the balance of power within the government, not only between the government and the people, but the balance of power between the three branches of government. So as we engage terrorists, as we pursue terrorists and terrorism, is it inevitable that we must lose our ideological identity, or is there a way through this mess? These are some of the ideas that we want to recognize and grapple with in our in our discussion forums. In these Homeland Security discussions, I try to keep at the forefront these founding principles from which our national identity is derived. I ask students in every conversation, in every discussion, to link their analysis of issues back to at least one of the American founding principles. So I want to challenge us that America, sometimes students will say, that the government has a duty to protect all Americans from any kind of danger, to make us safe from anything, from terrorists to volcanoes to hurricanes. I want to challenge that assumption. I want to challenge that assertion now and throughout the whole remainder of the study that we're engaged in. So I look forward to an exciting term, and I hope that it's informative and entertaining, and that it equips you for your future in Homeland Security. As always, should you have any questions of me, you can always call me or contact me via the school email.